Good morning, welcome to the AWE Source. This is Shock and Awful Part 2. I'm your host, Ryan Hill.
And I'm Gary the Hawk Hawkinson. So we now know where all the major players that caused this major collapse are.
Yeah, and running the country.
Yeah, but where does that leave us?
Yeah, and if you're watching us for the first time or need a refresher, go back to last week's show, catch up, and then come back and pick it up from here.
But seriously, where does that leave you and I? I mean, if the heads of industry can run their companies into the ground and not go to jail, matter of fact, quite the opposite, get rewarded with cush government jobs for what they've done, what does that mean for us?
You see, in life, there's checks and balances, consequences for your actions. Even if the Justice Department can't get it right, there's still consequences. It's like this. Let's take a bank robber. The bank robber goes and robs a local bank. He does this several times and steals lots and lots of money. And then finally he's caught. But the justice system can't find him guilty because of circumstantial evidence. So one could argue that there's no consequences for his actions. He didn't pay for them, right? Well, not so much. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Remember that? Isaac Newton was right. Bad guy, the robber, may have not paid for his actions, but don't get it twisted. Consequences will come. Maybe not to him, but somebody will pay. That's life, that's nature, and that's how it works.
So who pays? Well, how about the bank tellers that were held up at gunpoint? They have an emotional consequence that may follow them the rest of their lives. Or how about the taxpayer that funded the police and the justice systems that failed to do their job? They just wasted a lot of money that may have been better spent on infrastructure or public works.
How about the bank patrons? They pay consequences of higher fees and interest rates because the bank never got their money back. Point is, someone, if not the proper person, will pay. In our situation with our economic mess, since the original perpetrators didn't pay, guess who will? Yep, you got it. You and I.
Well, we already have in many ways. Pensions have been cut, millions of families have lost their homes, and millions more have lost their jobs, not to mention that we're on the brink of a full-fledged government collapse.
And don't say it'll never happen here in America. I agree it's not likely, but it already did happen back in 1971, right here. See, if you owned a U.S. Treasury bond back in 1971, for every $35 you had, the U.S. government promised to give you 1 ounce of gold. Then the U.S. government defaulted on that promise. They told us that they are not going to give us any gold for our Treasury bonds. And yes, even then, there were consequences to pay.
Runaway inflation, price of oil went up tenfold, and someone had to pay. And again, it was the U.S. citizens. But back to 2011. Haven't we suffered enough?
Yes, we have. But what doesn't add up is this. The government collects nearly $2 trillion a year in taxes. Out of that $2 trillion, roughly $300 billion goes to the interest payments on the debt. That leaves a lot of money on the table. So why are we even discussing a new debt ceiling? I will tell you why, and this all comes full circle.
We now know who's running the country, the Treasury, and the Fed. Guys that basically ran their companies into the ground while stealing millions of dollars. So it wouldn't be too far off to say that they are now doing the same thing that they did with their individual companies, but now with the government and our nation. Think about it. Just like the bank robber, if he goes unchecked, guess what? He continues to rob and steal. The same theory applies here, but on a much larger level.
Now, our bank robbers have gone unchecked and they continue their shenanigans, but on a much larger scale. This is essentially a giant Ponzi scheme. Now, what's the definition of a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is an investment scheme that involves the payments to existing investors, say China, from funds contributed by new investors, say U.S. bondholders or taxpayers. Now, Ponzi scheme organizers, our government, often solicit new investors by promising to invest in funds and opportunities claimed to generate high returns with little or no risk. Sounds like our failed mortgages that we already sold off. In many Ponzi schemes, the fraudsters focus on attracting new money, i.e., raising the debt ceiling, to make promised payments to earlier stage investors, again, China, and the leftover money is used for personal expenses instead of engaging in legitimate investment activity.
And once again, the crooks, government officials, they get what they want all at the expense of the people, you and I. Now the debt ceiling, it is concerning, but that's the personal equivalent of you and I giving ourselves a budget to live by. It doesn't mean a whole lot, now does it? What we are more concerned with, and what all of you should be concerned with, is what the hell is going to happen when China and other investors give us a lending limit.
See, America's been operating on what we got rid of years ago, stated income and stated asset loans. Now the world's underwriters, China, like in our industry, are saying 2 words: no more. We want to see the proof in the pudding. America, where's your assets and income? Show me proof. I want to see your last 2 years' tax returns and 2 months' bank statements. And like most of our clients, they don't have them. And if they do, they look really, really poor.
So what happens then? Well, just like in our industry, you get denied and the flow of money gets turned off. There's no more loans. And then ultimately, in a brilliant stroke of poetic justice, the American government will request a loan modification from its creditors because it can't afford to pay the loan back and they've lost all their equity. And because they've gone unchecked, they'll continue to do what they do. raise the debt ceiling, continue to borrow and print money until they collapse the entire operation, just like they did when they were running their respective companies.
These are the consequences for their actions. We can't stop it. It's too late. These transgressions have already occurred. The question now is, what will be the consequences if you and I continue to sit idly by and do nothing? Who knows? It remains to be seen. American citizens have yet to respond. I hope we respond in the right way, really, for all of our sake and for our children's sake.
Again, guys, please don't take this as fear-mongering. We're just truly fed up with all of this. We'll get back to the nature of our specific industry, real estate, but if we don't address this current economic crisis now, we won't have a real estate industry to speak of. So we feel that it's important to spread the word now.
Please do so by forwarding today and last week's show. There's only one more group more powerful than the banks and the government. That's the people, you and I. See you next week. I'm Ryan Hills.
And I'm Gary the Hawk Hawkins.